بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our fifth session of our class, Islamic Family Law. In our last session, we spoke about the ahkam of hijab, and we said that we will divide, inshallah, the discussion, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, into whom a Muslim woman must cover from. So the first category that we spoke about was the ajnabi, which is anyone that is not a mahram to the woman. We said that according to the Quran and the Hadith, a woman has to cover her entire body from the ajnabi, except the face and the two hands. Now, when we state that a woman must cover her entire body, it is also haram for a man to look at her body. So it goes both ways. The Muslim woman has an obligation and the Muslim man has an obligation. The obligation of the woman is to cover. So if she sees a man, she has to cover right away. The man also has an obligation to look away, to lower his gaze, because the Quran ordered both of them. The Quran ordered women to cover, and the Quran likewise ordered females to cover, and the Quran ordered males to look away, to lower their gaze. So for example, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. So for example, if a woman was not wearing hijab, meaning I'm walking by a house and I peek and I see a woman, a muhajjaba girl, is not wearing her hijab. Can I look? Of course not. Why? Because here I have an obligation that the Quran speaks about, and my obligation is to not look. So the first obligation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells men to lower their gaze. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. So if you see a woman that is not wearing hijab, she's in her house, or you accidentally enter a room where a lady is not wearing hijab, you can't just wait for her to wear the hijab and say, well, she's uncovered. No. The Quran says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men that they have to lower their gaze. And then females have a second obligation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. And let them not show their zina, their beauty, meaning their body, except the face and the hands. وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُوبِهِنَّ. They have to wear the hijab, the head covering. So they both have an obligation. That's why if a man was looking, a woman can't say, well, he's looking, he should look away. No. Remember, this is, unfortunately, sometimes this is the argument or the attitude used in the West. If a woman goes out half naked and there's someone looking, she says, well, you close your eyes. Islam says it's the obligation of both. The man cannot look, and at the same time, the woman has to cover themselves. So neither one of them can solely blame the other. The man can't say, well, you know what, she was half naked and I was looking. No, the Quran says you have to lower your gaze. And the woman can't say, well, it's their job, it's men's job. It's the man's job to look away. Yes, it's his job to look away, and it's your job to also dress modestly. So it's a collective effort between both of them. There's a question that comes here. Sometimes there are some Muslim women that don't want to wear hijab. They are not doing their obligation. But the obligation of a pious Muslim man is still there. So he has to lower his gaze. So if I go out in the street and there's tons of Muslim women not wearing hijab, right? What do? I have to lower my gaze. How can I even walk? How can I even see my way when there's so many Muslim women not wearing hijab? They're not doing their job, and that makes my life much more difficult. So what do? What does a Muslim man do in such a situation? Just because she's not wearing hijab doesn't mean that my obligation is also forgotten. My obligation is now, taken off my back. No, you have obligation to not look. So in order to ease this for Muslim men, there are hadith that tell us if a Muslim woman does not wear hijab, for whatever reason, she doesn't want to, she's not ready for it, She goes out in the public not wearing hijab. She defies the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and does not want to wear hijab. A man, Muslim man, is allowed to look at her without hijab. As long as she is willfully, intentionally not wearing hijab in the public. He can look at her, but without shahwa, meaning without lust, of course, just a normal look. Because it'd be too difficult. Sometimes, you go to the Middle East, a Muslim country, you see hundreds of women not wearing hijab. So you can't even walk in that street because everywhere you look, your eye will fall on a Muslim woman not wearing hijab. So to ease life for, in such situations, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have told us that a man is allowed to look as long as she's a woman that doesn't care about hijab. Where is this mentioned? This is mentioned in a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, narrated by Ubbad ibn Sahib. He says that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said this: لا بأس بالنظر إلى رؤوس أهل تهامة أو تهامة والأعراب وأهل السواد والعلوج لأنهم إذا نهوا لا ينتهون. The Imam said, it is okay to see the head, meaning the head, the hair, of the females of the tribe or the people of Tuhama, meaning Mecca, or Al-A'rab, the Bedouins, or Ahl Sawad, a certain group or a tribe, Ahl Sawad, or the Uluj, the disbelievers, meaning the non-Muslims, women that aren't wearing hijab. Why? Because the Imam gives the reasoning. He says, because لأنهم إذا نهوا لا ينتهون. Because if they are ordered to cover up, they won't. Since they won't do their obligation, then you can look. This is the hadith of the Imam. So any female that defies the obligation of hijab, the man here is allowed to look at that woman. He does not have to lower his gaze. Yes?
So, what about the intention? Looking at the woman or looking in front of him, for example, or looking...
Even if he looks at her intentionally, it's halal. As long as it is without shahwa. There's two types of looks. There is a look that is with shahwa, with lust. Looking at the opposite gender with lust. This is always haram. Lust is only between a man and his wife. Any other individual, even with your, mahrams, with your sister, this is all haram. So if he looks at any female with lust, it becomes haram. We're talking about without shahwa, because remember, I'm not allowed to see another Muslim woman that's not mahram. I'm not allowed to look at her hands and her body parts except her face and her hand. Even without lust, even if there is absolutely no lust, it's haram. That's why we said doctors are not mahram. Doctor says, well, I'm looking at your hand to treat you. Doesn't matter. The Quran didn't say for what reason. When a man is not allowed to look at the body of a Muslim woman, it doesn't mean only if it's with lust, if he has bad intentions, if he has sexual intentions. No, it is haram to look, period, for whatever reason. Unless she is a woman that doesn't wear hijab, then you can look at her entire body, of course, except the private parts. Without lust. With lust, everything. With lust, even the face becomes haram. Even the hands become haram. Lust is only between man and wife. So is that clear why we're saying this? Because it is haram to look even without lust, unless the lady it is haram to look without lust, unless the lady or the Muslim woman doesn't wear hijab. Then you can look at her body without lust because of the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq.
So, because even sometimes you have relatives.
Yes.
Sitting in a jam'ah and they're not wearing hijab.
Exactly. You're sitting with relatives. I'm sitting with my cousin. I'm sitting with my sister-in-law. They're not mahram, remember? And she's not wearing a hijab. Do I have to lower my gaze as the Quran said? As long as she does not wear hijab, then I don't have to lower my gaze, but I cannot look with lust, with desire. Just a normal look without any lust becomes halal. Naam.
Also applies to watching TV.
Exactly. This applies to watching TV. So when I'm a Muslim man and there's a woman that's not wearing hijab on TV, obviously intentionally, I can look at her without lust. I can look at her with lust, it becomes haram. Now, what about the mahram? So this was all between a Muslim woman and the ajnabi, meaning a stranger. What about with the maharim? A Muslim woman, her father, her brother, her son, her nephew, her uncle, these maharim, the blood relatives through rada' suckling or through marriage, the examples we gave earlier. which areas of their mahram are they allowed to look at? So, when it comes to my sister, my mother, my aunt, which areas of their body can I look at and which areas do they have to cover? When it comes to this topic, the Quran says that a woman does not have to cover her body from her mahrams. In the verse you see in front of you, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا, they cannot show their body except لِبُعُولَتِهِنَّ, their husbands, أو آبائهن, أو آباء بُعُولَتِهِنَّ, أو أبنائهن, until the end of the verse. A woman does not have to cover her body from her husband, from her father, father-in-law, her children, her brothers, her nephews and brothers, and so on and so forth, all the mahram. But does that mean she can expose her entire body? No, of course not. We know there are exceptions. So what are those exceptions? Which body parts does a Muslim woman have to cover from her mahrams, relatives? Here there are two opinions. The first opinion is the one that holds a Muslim woman can expose her entire body in front of the mahram except the two private parts. Those are the only two parts that have to be covered. Now remember, if there is lust, everything becomes haram. She has to wear the full hijab. If she knows there's, should be a rare situation, a sick family member that is looking at her with lust, and she has to cover here. And he's not allowed to look. We're talking about all these masail without lust. Anytime you bring in lust, it's different. So the entire body is okay, except the private parts. Why? Because there are hadith that speak about the awra. Awra is the private parts. And the Imams define what the awra is. They tell us it's the two private parts, whether male or female, and these must always be covered from any other human being, except the spouse, of course. So it doesn't matter mahram, ghair mahram, it's all haram. And this is the view of Sayyid al-Sistani. He says that the awra of a woman towards the mahram is only the private parts. And then there's a second opinion. The second opinion holds that no, it's much more than the private parts. A Muslim woman has to cover between her belly to the knees. That entire area between the belly button to the knees, all of that is her awra, meaning her father, her brother cannot see between the belly button up down to the knees. This is all a place she has to cover, and the mahram is not allowed to see. This view is the view of Sayyid al-Khou'i, rahmatullah alayh, and other scholars.
Yes.
So Sayyid al-Sistani and other scholars, they believe it's only the private parts, the awra of a mahram woman. Sayyid al-Khou'i says, no, it's much more than that. A Muslim woman has to cover from the belly button to the knees from all the other mahram. Now, what's the justification of Sayyid al-Khou'i? A hadith that you see in front of you. An Al-Hussein ibn Alwan, a narrator, he says, I heard Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam say, إِذَا زَوَّجَ الرَّجُلْ أَمَتَهُ فَلَا يَنظُرَنَّ إِلَىٰ عَوْرَتِهَا وَالْعَوْرَ مَا بَيْنَ السُّرَّ وَالرُّكْبَةِ. The Imam said, Imam al-Baqir said, if someone marries his amma, now what is amma? We'll get to that. He cannot look at the awra. And then the Imam defined, if you ask, what's the awra? He said, and the awra in this situation is between the belly and the knees. Sayyid al-Khou'i understood this hadith as speaking about someone's daughter. The word amma in the Arabic language can be your daughter, a girl, which can mean your daughter, or it can mean a slave, a female slave. It has two meanings. Sayyid al-Khou'i understands from this hadith that the Imam meant daughter. So if someone marries his daughter, he cannot look at her awra. What's the awra? Between the belly to the knees. So mahram, the Imam said belly to the knees, is the awra. It's not okay to see it. So this is the view of Sayyid al-Khou'i. Some scholars, they say this hadith does not prove Sayyid al-Khou'i's point because number one, it's speaking about amma. Amma here means female slave. So it's not speaking about your daughter. No, your daughter, her awra is like the awra of any other individual. It's the two private parts. So this definition of awra only applies to a female slave. So that's one argument that they bring against Sayyid al-Khou'i. Now, which one's right? But we leave that between the scholars. The other issue is there's a problem with Hussein ibn Alwan. this narrator, is he trustworthy, reliable, or no? There is disagreement between the ulama. Let me give you some insight into a bahath that is rijali, meaning it's from the science of men, bahth rijal. How do we understand if someone is trustworthy or not? So Al-Hussein ibn Alwan is mentioned in the book of Al-Najashi. Al-Najashi was one of our ulama that lived approximately 1,000 years ago. He compiled a book of many of the narrators, and he put which one is reliable, which one's not. He didn't put all of them, of course, there's too many. He put a good amount. And it's one of the best works that we have that tell us which of the narrators are reliable and which are not. What does Najashi say in his book? You can see, I brought his exact words. Al-Hussein ibn Alwan al-Kalbi, مولاهم كوفي عامي وأخوه الحسن يكنى أبا محمد ثقة روي عن أبي عبد الله وليس للحسن كتاب. What does Najashi say about Al-Hussein ibn Alwan? This is how our ulama find out and investigate if a narrator is reliable or not. Najashi says Hussein ibn Alwan, and then he speaks about him. He says he's from Kufa. He's Ammi, meaning he's not Shia, he's Sunni. And then he says this, and his brother Hassan's title, his kunya as title, is Abu Muhammad. So all of a sudden he starts speaking about Hussein, and then he shifts to his brother Hassan. He says his brother Hassan's title is Abu Muhammad. And then he says this, he is trustworthy. And they are both narrators of Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. They both narrate from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Now when he said he is trustworthy, was he speaking about Hassan or Hussein? It's kind of confusing because he started speaking about Hussein and he's speaking about Hussein. This is Hussein's, slot. But then between parentheses, he says, oh, by the way, his brother Hassan's title is Muhammad. Do we close the second parentheses now and then he goes back to Hussein once again? Or no, is the parentheses still opened? So basically he's saying Hussein is from Kufa, he is Ami. Oh, and by the way, his brother Hassan's title is Abu Muhammad, his brother Hassan is trustworthy. And then he goes back and they both are narrators of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Sayyid al-Khoi believes that the word he refers to Hussein that we're speaking about. And other ulama, they say no. It goes back to Hassan. Other ulama, they say it's not clear. It's not clear whether it goes to Hassan or Hussein. That's why we cannot rely on this text of An-Najashi. Sayyid al-Khoi says, it doesn't make sense that An-Najashi is speaking about Hussein ibn Alwan, and he does not tell us if he's reliable or not. And then between parentheses, he tells us if his brother is reliable, and he forgets to tell us about Hussein, which he's speaking about. So it doesn't make sense. So that just goes back to what you understand from the words of An-Najashi himself. Sometimes there's disagreement on the words of the Imam. What did he mean? Sometimes even the words of our earlier ulama, they're not clear. Is he trying to tell us Hussein is trustworthy and he's the one that narrates this hadith of the awra of the Amma? Or no, he's speaking about Hassan. Hussein doesn't tell us. And when Najashi doesn't tell you someone's trustworthy, that means he's not trustworthy, or else he would have told you. So a Muslim woman's awra towards another Muslim woman. What can a Muslim woman expose in front of another Muslim woman? This is our next discussion. Here, according to all ulama, it's only the private parts that are haram. Excluding the two private parts, everything is halal without lust, of course. This is taken from a hadith of Imam al-Kadhim that I mentioned many times. The Imam says, Al-awra awratan. There are two parts to the awra. Al-qubul wa-dubur. The front and the back. And we have absolutely no other hadith verse that says beyond that is haram. If there is no lust, of course, it's all halal. But once again, is it appropriate? That same discussion comes here again. And the same thing applies to men. A man with another man. The only area that they're not allowed to see is the private parts. That's it. Now let's go to the hijab of men. So we said women have to cover their entire body in front of an ajnabi, a stranger, male, except the face and the hands. What about a man? What does a man have to cover? A man has to cover only his private parts in front of a woman. Why? Because this was the hadith of Imam al-Kadhim that I just showed you. He said that the awra is the two private parts. There's no other hadith that tell us a man has, another obligation. For women, there is. The Quran says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جِيُوبِهِنَّ. So the Quran gives more requirements that they have to cover. For men, there is no hadith, there is no verse. And remember, when we issue any ruling, we need proof. So a man is allowed to show his entire body in the public except the two private parts. Once again, is that appropriate? Of course not. But it's not haram. However, listen carefully, brothers and sisters. However, remember we said there's two obligations. The obligation of the person exposing and covering, the obligation of the person looking. So when it comes to the obligation of a man himself, he can show his entire body except the two private parts. But when it comes to the obligation of women, can they see the entire body of a man? Here, there's a difference in opinion between the ulama. There's two opinions. The first opinion holds that a woman could look at the entire body of a man except the private parts. So whatever he can show, you can see. It goes both ways. A man can show his entire body except the private parts, and a woman can look without lust. Remember, without lust. This is one view. And then there's another view that says, even though the man can expose his entire body except the private parts, she cannot look. She has to look away because his obligation is different from her obligation. Remember? We said sometimes they go hand in hand. Sometimes she's not wearing, but I can look. Remember, we said women that don't wear hijab. They're not doing their obligation. I can look too. So here, the second opinion says that a woman cannot look at the entire body of the man, even if he's uncovered. So what can she look at? They say she cannot look at more than what is usually the norm in an Islamic environment. In an Islamic religious area in the Middle East, what body parts usually the men show in public? Those are the body parts that she can see. He can expose more than that, but she cannot see more than that. They don't define it very clearly. They say what the norm is, the custom is in religious cities, religious, villages. People don't go out, men don't go out in shorts there, right? In tank tops. That's kind of inappropriate. Maybe here in America, that's fine. So during the times of the Imams, in what way did men go out in the public? That's what a woman is allowed to see. So for example, they say the head, the hair, the ears, the neck is all okay. A woman can see that from a man. The hands are okay, maybe up to the arms even are okay. The feet, the legs, maybe not too high, up to the knees, but a part of the legs would be okay. But more than that, the stomach, the chest, the thighs, no, this is not acceptable. And this is the view of Sayyid al-Sistani. Sayyid al-Sistani says that a man can uncover, but a woman cannot see more than these parts that we spoke about. But he does not give a definitive ruling. He says, على الأحوط وجوبا, precautionary, obligatory precaution. أحوط وجوبا means this is my fatwa, but you can follow someone else, the other marja. If another marja has another view, you can follow him. This is what ihtiyat wujubi is. But if you don't want to follow someone else, then you have to abide by it being haram. You can't look.
So
Yes.
Sistani, like a t-shirt and the shorts till the knee is okay.
He doesn't define it. He doesn't give all the body parts. He says it in a vague way. He says, what are men accustomed in religious areas? That is okay. I would say t-shirt is okay, yes. Shorts, I don't know about the legs. Maybe parts of the legs, but up to the knee, I don't know if he allows that. I'm not sure. It's one of those gray areas because he himself, Sayyid Sistani, doesn't have a very clear, definition himself where he can go back and tell you, oh, this part. No, he's telling you during the time of the Imams, how was it? Did people wear shorts then? Not really. But sometimes parts of their leg would be exposed. But up to the knee, it's not clear.
So what I understand is that the obligation is not on the man. He can wear whatever he wants, on the woman not to look.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So the obligation not on the man. The man can wear whatever he wants.
Yes, remember we said two obligations.
Yeah.
A man can uncover his entire body in public except the two private parts. What can a woman see? We said two opinions. The first says she can see everything except the two private parts. Second opinion, which is of that Sayyid al-Sistani, ala al-ahwat wujuban, is no, she can't see most of the body, only parts of the male's body. Even though he can expose it, but you can't look, you have to look away, lower your gaze. I'm sorry, there was a question that I just saw now. Can a non-mahram look at a normal hijabi on TV without hijab in cases of war pictures? So when it comes to pictures, most ulama, they say that pictures are the same thing as real life. Some ulama, they say they don't give a definitive fatwa. They say ala al-ahwat wujuban, because a picture isn't really, it isn't really the person itself. But still, they say ala al-ahwat wujuban, you're not allowed to look. So according to most ulama, or probably all of them, that you're not allowed to look at a picture of a hijabi without hijab. So someone steals her picture or takes a picture of her privately, and then they expose it. Am I allowed to look? No, I can't look. Sometimes you see on the internet, maybe, a hijabi is exposed without hijab. That's haram, whoever exposed her. If I look, that's another sin. Look away. Don't look, because she has an obligation and you have an obligation. If she was, for example, wronged and someone exposed her, then I have no right to look. I have to look away. So it is not okay to see the picture of a hijabi without hijab. If she doesn't wear hijab, then yes, you can look without lust, because you can even look at her in real life without hijab, as we mentioned. Now, going back to this topic of the hijab of men, someone may ask why. Why is it with women, they have to cover and men can't look? But with men, they don't have to cover, but women can't look. So they have it easier. The reason is because this is obviously based on the second opinion, because the first opinion says she can look at the entire body of the man except the private part. So we're speaking about the view of a Sayyid al-Sistani. Why do they say that? The reason, my friends, is because when we go to the Quran says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze. When you see a man, don't look, right? So what these ulama, they said, that what we understand from this verse, that a woman cannot look at the entire body of a man, because the Quran says don't look. The Quran didn't say don't look at kada wa kada. The Quran says don't look. So when you see a male, I'm a female, look away. The entire body, I'm not allowed to look at. However, we know that the face, the head, the hands are okay. We know that for sure, even though the verse didn't say that, because during the time of Rasulullah, the Prophet never said anything. He himself would go out, his face is showing, his hair is showing, his neck, his hands are showing, and women would look at him. Now remember, it's not his job to cover, but he would see a woman looking at him and he wouldn't say anything. Why didn't he tell them, oh women, don't look at me? غضوا من أبصاركم. He would not say that. So that proves to us that this verse from the Quran doesn't mean the entire body a woman cannot look at. No, there are certain exclusions that we spoke about that are the normal, customary in religious communities. So this is the order of the Quran. But when it comes to, well, you may say, well, Allah also told men to lower their gaze, right? But Allah also mentioned exceptions. He said the face is okay, the hand is okay of the woman. So he told both genders don't look. Men don't look and women don't look. But the difference is he told women cover up, but he didn't tell men cover up. You see the difference? He told both genders to lower your gaze. But he only told women to cover up in the Quran. He never told men to cover up. So we understand that women have two obligations. They have to cover up and they cannot look. A man has one obligation. He has to lower his gaze, but he does not have to cover his body. And there are hadith. So this is the verse in the Quran that proves I'm not allowed to look at a male. We think that just it's for men. Men can't look at women. No, women can't look at men. And these are two ahadith that I will read for you from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The first one is narrated by Ahmed ibn Abi Abdullah al-Barqi. He says, استأذن ابن مكتوم على النبي وعنده عائشة وحفصة فقال لهما قوما فادخلا البيت فقالتا إنه أعمى فقال رسول الله إن لم يركما فإنكما تريانه. Ibn Maktoum was a blind man. He came to see the Holy Prophet, Who was next to Rasulullah? His two wives, Aisha and Hafsa. The Prophet told them to go in the room. So Ibn Maktoum comes in. When he told them go in the room, because they weren't wearing hijab, they told Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, he's blind. He's not going to see us. So their understanding is the same as many people today. It's haram for a man to see a woman, but a woman can see a man. This is what many people think, right? A woman can see any man she wants, but a man can't look. Rasulullah told them, he's blind, but you're not blind, right? He replied, he told them, إِن لَمْ يَرَكُمَا, if he can't see you, فَإِنَّكُمَا تَرِيَانَهُ, you can see him. So go in the room so you don't see him. So that means it's the obligation of both. So this is one hadith that shows us that it's the obligation of women to not look. Another hadith, Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Al-Hussein, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله اشتد غضب الله على امرأة ذات بعل ملأت عينها من غير زوجها أو غير ذي محرم منها. The Prophet said Allah was angered when a married woman filled her eyes. How? Meaning she looked so much. She filled her eyes with looking at another man, not her husband and not a mahram. So you can only look at your husband and your mahram. Ajnabi, you're not allowed to look. Fill your eyes with that look and it's haram. Now this hadith, some ulama have argued this is speaking about a married woman. So it's not for all women. Others have said this is a look with lust. Obviously, we understand, because if it's not with lust, so it's not very, very clear. But the point is, I'm trying to bring a hadith to show you one side of the argument, that there are a hadith from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that show us that even for women, they're not allowed to look at a man. Now, are these 100% correct, sahih? Do they exactly lead to this argument? That's debatable between the ulama. But the point is, there's two opinions. The first opinion, that a woman is allowed to look at the entire body of a man without lust, excluding the private parts. And the second opinion is no, she's only allowed to look at certain body parts like the face, the hands, the hair, the neck, the feet. Other than that, she is not allowed to look, even if he is exposing that. It goes back to your intention, of course, what you meant by cute. But usually, I mean, when a girl says about a guy cute, it's inappropriate. It's usually said in a lustful way. Now, you can mean it in any way you want, but I'm speaking in general. When one person from the opposite gender says cute or gorgeous about someone from the other gender, this is usually inappropriate because, and that's why, you know, if you're in a professional setting, you wouldn't tell your coworker you're cute because she's going to think you have feelings for her. Oh, you know what? I saw that today, mashallah, there's nur in your face, and I said you're cute. You know, she's gonna think that, you know, yeah, there's something wrong with you or you're playing with words. So the point is, if there is any lustful intentions, it becomes haram. If not, it shouldn't be haram as long as society doesn't also interpret it as something wrong. Even though I had no bad intentions, but it's still inappropriate. I could say, oh, there's nur in your face. I see a alim, I see a man. Yeah, this is appropriate. This is something completely fine. So you also have to be careful how you word yourself, because sometimes you send messages even without you meaning it. Now, this is with the looks. Remember, the dress, the looks. What about with speech? With speech, as long as it's not flirting. The Imam calls it in one hadith, mufakaha. Mufakahat al-nisa is haram. It's flirting when you're, you know, sweet talking, or you're just nonsense talk that is, you know, inappropriate. And we know that. We don't need a definition. A human being knows when he's flirting, when he's, you know, he's talking just because she's a female. If it was a man, I wouldn't talk this way. Versus I'm talking about the weather. If it was Brother Ali, I would say the same thing as Sister Zainab. It doesn't matter, right? If it's something that I'm saying it just because of the gender, then this becomes, it's called flirting, it's called mufakaha. This is haram. This is unacceptable. And likewise, it is haram for a woman to soften her voice. And this is mentioned in the Holy Quran. فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ فِي الْقَوْلِ, or فَلَا يَخْضَعْنَ فِي الْقَوْلِ. Meaning, don't soften. You know, women, they have a way in which they can soften their voice and it attracts men. This is haram. If they do it in a way that's going to attract men and, you know, bring attention. So in the same way that with your looks don't bring the attention, with your speech don't bring attention. So act modestly. If the Quran says act modestly, I think that's enough. Everything else, we can decide if it's modest or not. And you see it in movies, you know, how times some girls or women, how they talk to men and they try to lure them, or how they try to attract them with their voice. This is haram also. Anything besides that, if it's not flirting, if it's not something I'm saying, you know, just because she's a female or just because he's a man and I'm a female, and I'm not softening my voice to please the other gender, everything else is halal. So we just have to be careful from these things, and everything else is halal. هذا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.